House of Israel International Services are held weekly at 3601 Rose Lake Drive, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28217, 11 a.m. Saturday mornings and 7 p.m. Thursday evenings, Eastern Time. This live broadcast is made possible through financial contributions from brothers and sisters like you. Your financial support is greatly appreciated. Thank you. Motivating. Inspiring. Challenging. Encouraging. Deepening. Strengthening. And enhancing your faith. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to House of Israel International's live worship service.
And this message today is going to be twofold, and I want to complete it all today. I mean, I could stretch it out, but I don't want to do that. I want to give the pertinent pieces that I believe is going to help us today. Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy 6, verse number 1, and here's how it reads. Now these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which Jehovah your Elohim commanded to teach you, that you might do them in the land whether you go to possess it, that thou mightest fear Jehovah your Elohim, to keep all his statutes and his commandments which I command thee, thou and thy son and thy son's son, all the days of thy life, and that thy days may be prolonged. Hear, therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with thee, and that you may increase mightily, as Jehovah Elohim of thy fathers has promised thee, in the land that floweth with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, Jehovah our Elohim is one Jehovah. And thou shalt love Jehovah your Elohim with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. When we look at this particular verse 7, Father is saying to us that we have not only a responsibility to keep these statutes, but that we are to teach them to our children, and we are to talk about them and when we sit in our houses, when we walk by the way, when we go to sleep, and even when we rise up. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this is 24/7. Now, maybe I'm the only one who see this, but what I see here is that every day, all day, no break days, that we are to communicate his word to our children as we live his word. Many children today are at risk in several places, including homes, in churches, in congregations, in assemblies, in fellowships, and schools. And today, I want to talk to you about a matter that I believe affects all of us. Every one of us have been affected to some degree, and I want to minister to those of you who have, and we want to really share with you and encourage you so that the individuals who have not been affected will be protected, and those of us who have been affected will be ministered to and healed. no family is immune from sexual predators. And as parents, we have a responsibility to teach our children about appropriate and inappropriate behavior, especially in the area of sexuality. Now, we're going to talk about sex today. But the main focus is child sexual abuse and molestation. This is not a message that you would hear often in congregational settings, but it is something that has affected almost every adult on the planet. And it's a subject that we need to deal with. Priests, bishops, pastors, coaches, teachers have all been accused of violating children. Some of the most well-known cases of child abuse and sexual predators have been named among the Catholic priests, the Mormons, Anglicans, Baptists, Judaism, and other Protestant-type churches. Children have been violated by siblings, by neighbors, by uncles, by aunts, by parents, at sleepovers, at outings, and camping. As parents, we are instructed to teach our children concerning the commandments of Jehovah. And within those commandments, we are instructed to teach them about proper behavior between men and women, proper behavior concerning sexual perversions with animals, proper behavior with men and concerning men with men, as well as women with women. Now, this is not a subject that we seem to have to or should be having to deal with. But the fact of the matter is that somebody's got to deal with it. And this is the place that it needs to be dealt with. Now, some of you are going to start having flashbacks. Some of you are going to go back in time. Some of you are going to have memory awakenings. And that's okay, because the whole point of today's message is healing and deliverance and wholeness. The Bible teaches us that we should train our children in the way they should go. We should not leave it up to the schools. We shouldn't leave it up to the internet, social media, neighbors, magazines. We are to teach our children about sex and abstinence. Once a child has been exposed to sexual misconduct, their lives are altered. How we as parents, community, and society respond will determine the long-term effect on our children. Once a child has been violated, they become confused. They question their sexuality. Sometimes they begin to explore. Curiosity occurs, which create more confusion. And I don't need to tell you all today that we live in a very confused world. Sexual perversion is rampant. You can't turn on the TV, you can't go to a movie, you can't even seemingly go out in public without being inundated by sexual perversion. And we've become so immune, in a sense, so desensitized to it, to where words that used to sting our ears don't affect our hearing anymore. Things that we would immediately turn a program, a television program from, we pay and go and watch in movies. We pay big money and set up in movie houses and watch screens where people are cursing and using all manner of language and all kinds of sexual perversion and language and attitudes. You see people who are committing adultery, fornicating, men with men, women with women, and we watch this stuff. Not all of us, but you know who you are. More people are identified as bisexual. Think about this. The majority of our young people today identify with some type of altered sexual personality, whether it be bisexual, lesbian, gay, transsexual. Transsexual is not a new term, but it's resurfaced as a term that where you got people who not just go both ways, they go anyway. Male sexual abuse survivors have twice the HIV infection rate of non-abused males. In a study of HIV-infected 12 to 20-year-olds, 41% reported a sexual abuse history. Now, I've always felt that individuals who have alternate lifestyles more than likely have been affected as a child through some form of molestation. Now there are statistics to prove it. And these stats, ladies and gentlemen, this particular one, it was done back in 2006. Sexual perversion is common in society today. More and more people are having sex. Fornication is common, and fewer people are remaining abstinent until marriage. Fewer parents are even talking to their children about abstinence and being a virgin, saving themselves until they get married. The big thing when I was a child is don't bring no babies home. Not protect and preserve yourself for your wife, but don't bring any babies home. And today, there's hardly any family out there that actually have young people, teenagers, above teenagers, young adults, who have not been involved in some manner sexually, or who don't have a child. And that creates a problem. It creates a complicated relationship, because as a parent who has a child born out of wedlock, one now has to begin to reassess and modify their values and how they relate to this child. To be a virgin is almost unheard of. A confused child becomes a confused adult. A confused child becomes a confused adult. In Matthew chapter 18, Yeshua says these words. He said, "Verily I say unto you, except you be converted and become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven." And then he says, "Whosoever shall receive one such little child in my name receiveth me." Now, this is a powerful statement when you look at what he says afterwards. "But whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea." These are the words of Yeshua. And he's dealing with the issue of children being offended. Now, he doesn't say sexual predators or molestation, but when you dig into the word of the offense, you'll find that it certainly embodies this type of behavior and effect that these things have on children. Woe unto the world because of offenses. For it must needs be that offenses come, but woe to that man by whom the offense cometh. Wherefore, if thy hand or thy foot offend thee, cut them off and cast them from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life halt or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be cast into everlasting fire. Now, when you look at the context of what he's saying here, Look at the next verse. And if thine eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life with one eye than having two eyes to be cast into hellfire. Take heed. Take heed. Now, in between talking about abusing children, he goes into this dialogue of how it would be better for individuals not to, but those who do, they're going to have some hell to pay. Understand this. And then he begins to lay down what this is going to seem like or be like. And then he transitions back into the original conversation. For I say unto you that in heaven, their angels, whose angels? These little ones. Take heed that you despise not one of these little ones. For I say unto you that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. And what is he saying? That there are angels that are assigned to children. These angels are not going to stop children from being abused, but it's going to report every child abuse that occurs directly to the face of Jehovah, and Jehovah's punishment is severe. No one gets away. No one gets away. Now, this is important news for those of you who were abused, that you can let it go because the Almighty has that person in his periscope or in his sight. And the only thing that can stop the wrath of the Almighty upon the lives and upon the persons who have committed such criminal act is repentance. It's repentance. You see, when a child is abused, there are two things. There's the abused, and then there is the abuser. Molestation, defined, the crime of sexual acts with children up to the age of 18. Now, this is a legal definition. It includes touching of private parts, exposure of genital, taking of pornographic pictures, rape, inducement of sexual acts with the molester or with other children, and variations of these acts by pedophiles. Molestation also applies to the incest by a relative with a minor family member and any unwanted sexual acts with adults short of rape. Now, you might say, well, why are you dealing with this? The fact is that every person is affected differently, and oftentimes the behavior of people can be traced back to child molestation. There are gaps. There are individuals who, when certain traumatic things happen, there's a tendency to block out memory, but the effect of what has happened manifests itself in various ways of that individual, even though they may not necessarily remember what has happened to them. The effect of what has happened to them begins to play out in their lives. Ministries have a tendency to approach these issues with deliverance ministry, wanting to cast out spirits because of behavior patterns and sins of fathers and generational curses and all the names that they've attributed to these things, when it just may need simply to identify the fact that something has occurred, address that particular issue, minister to that particular person so that they can be freed, healed, and move on with their lives. I'm going to show you a few stats. Molestation also applies to incest by a relative. Said that 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused before age 18. 1 in 10. Now this is based on some 1999 numbers, because the information on child molestation, especially in religious environments, is a closely guarded secret. Most people don't want to acknowledge it. Most folks don't want to admit it. There's stigmas, there's embarrassment, there's shame, there's all kinds of things that is associated. So these are things that are easily swept under the rug, and oftentimes you'll find that much of this goes unnoticed or not dealt with. Now, even though 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused before age 18, a conservative estimate is that 2 in every 10 little girls and 1 in every 10 little boys are victims. And again, this is based on the population reported in the 1999 U.S. Census Statistical Abstract. Now, these numbers are not always reported. And the thing about most sexual abuse with children is that they go unreported. Well over 3 million children per year are victims. Now imagine that. Just for a moment. 3 million children, that's 46 National Football League stadiums packed with children who are today being sexually abused and believe they have no adult to go to for help. Back in the late 90s, churches began to have people go through background checks if they were going to work with children. That was a way of saying, listen, we've got a problem. We're not going to really address the problem, but we're going to try to curb the opportunities and the potential of that problem helping by simply submitting individuals to background checks. But many individuals who are sexual predators haven't been caught. And so even though they may do a background check on a person, the background is going to come back clean because they've never been caught and they're not on some register. While at the same time, they're continuing to do their behavior with children because most of these individuals are trusted by other folks who give them access to these children. Reports show that every sexual predator of an adult nature have at least 400 victims. One person. An estimated 42 million, and this is based on 2006 numbers, an estimate 42 million survivors of childhood sexual abuse exist in America. This was in 2006. A sexually abused child grew up to become an adult who was sexually abused as a child. The damage can be traumatic, but there is healing. 60% of child sexual abuse victims never tell anybody. Of children who are sexually abused, 20% are abused before the age of 8. %90 of child sexual abuse victims know their abuser. Remember when we were taught not talk to strangers? Don't talk to strangers. The strangers weren't the problems. The predators was in the house. The predators were family members and friends of family. Fact. Those who molest children look and act just like everyone else. There are people who have or will sexually abuse children in churches, in schools, and in youth sport leagues. Just in the last couple of years, we've seen people go to jail. We've seen coaches exposed. The information that have come out about the Catholic Church that has been occurring for years and years and years. Boston, Washington. This information is coming out. There's reports of bishops. And then now with the trend, the uptick of sexual perversion as far as same-sex marriages, these are outcomes and results 9 times out of 10 of individuals who have been molested as a child and didn't know how to process what has happened to them, so they lived it out and began to question their sexuality, began to question their identity, began to question everything about themselves, and even the leadership and the people that were put in their lives for the sake of protecting them. A breakdown of authority, moral authority, spiritual authority, family authority. This is a contrast between admitted molesters versus all American men. Married or formerly married, 77%. Now, this was based on a survey of 400 men. 77% admitted child molesters. Some had college, 46%. 30% only had high school educations. 69% was working, and look at that bottom number. 93% were church-going, religious. The largest number on the graph. Abusers can be neighbors, friends, family members. People who sexually abuse children can be found in family, schools, churches, recreation centers, youth sport leagues, and any other place children gather. Significantly, abusers can be and often are other children. Most children are molested by other children. 1 in 7 child sexual abuse incidents perpetrated by juveniles occur on school days between 3 p.m. and 7 p.m. Guess what parents are? Many children are left alone for way too many hours, and then people got the audacity to think that they can just come to church, drop their child off in youth ministry, and go fellowship like everything's going to be all right, when most of the pedophiles, ladies and gentlemen, we find are religious. It is a parent's responsibility always to know where their child is, who their child is with, and who check up on their child. Which children do child molesters target? Biological children, 19%. Stepchildren, adopted and foster children, 30%. Brothers and sisters, 12%. Nieces and nephews, 18%. Grandchildren, these are grandfolks now, 5%. Child left in someone else's care, 5%. And these are children in the neighborhood. Oftentimes, you know, you got individuals who come to babysit your child so you can go out and have some date time. Child of friend or neighbor, 40%. And the smallest number there, besides children left in care and grandchildren, are strangers. Ethnic groups. I mean, this information is broke down. I was really surprised as I started going down this path, looking for research, looking for factual data, old but still there, that admitted child molesters, the majority, 79%, were Caucasian, 9% Hispanic and Latin Americans, 6% African Americans, 1% Asian, and 3% Native Americans. Results of child molestation: mental health disorders, addictions, risk for intimate partner violence, alcoholism and alcohol abuse, illicit drug abuse, smoking and drinking at an early age, depression, suicide attempts. These are the outcomes, the results of individual children who have been affected through child molestation. Sexual reproductive health issues and risk factors. Children who have been molested, chances are, will have multiple sexual partners. They are most at risk for sexually transmitted diseases, unintended pregnancies, early initiation of sexual activity, adolescent pregnancy, and fetal death. Child sexual abuse can result in both short and long-term harm, including psychopathology. And this is people, there was a report that it cost in the lifetime of one child who have been sexually abused, that go through the processes and systems, that in the lifetime of a child who has been sexually abused, it cost $210,000 in medical attention for that child. For a child who has diabetes, or an individual who has suffered stroke, a child who has been molested costs more medically. Those individuals are right in the $191,000, $190,000 range over the course of a lifetime, compared to $210,000 for a child who had been sexually abused. Indicators and effects include depression, anxiety, poor self-esteem, sleep disturbances, eating disorders, and dissociative and anxiety disorders, including post-traumatic stress disorders. And what is this? PTSD. The same type of stress a person who goes into combat. Imagine a child who has been sexually molested go through the same symptoms and stress as an individual who have gone and fought in foreign wars and have come back. The nightmares, the fears. They're more likely to be cruel toward animals, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, teenage pregnancy, risky sexual behaviors may appear in adolescence. Child sexual abuse victims report almost 4 times as many incidences of self-inflicted harm, slashing wrists, attempted suicide, pushing themselves to the edge, drinking. And here's some of this is a chart that deals with the association of childhood sex abuse with drug dependency and psychiatric disorders among adult women. Because women are 2 times more likely to be molested than a man than a boy based on the statistics, but at the same time, many of the cases are never ever reported. And most parents don't have a clue that their child has been molested. Most parents don't have a clue. All they know is that their child is displaying this behavior that is inconsistent with what they've been taught. That's all they know. And they can't understand it. So when it comes down to individuals who have had non-genital, individuals who have been funneled and touched, we find that there's a high dependency of drugs. And why? We can't really say, but we know that people who take drugs have been accused of an escapism, trying to escape something, trying to medicate something. And much of what individuals are medicating is memory, pain, hurt, trauma, stress, alcohol dependence, depression. And then there are 2 or more orders, and this is based on non-genital intercourse and any sexual abuse whatsoever. A study funded by the U.S. National Institute of Drug Abuse found that among more than 1,400 adult females, childhood sexual abuse was associated with increased likelihood of drug dependence, alcohol dependence, and psychiatric disorders. And we wonder, as we think about these shootings, these criminal activities and behaviors, drug addictions and meth and all of the problems that are plaguing our communities among our young people. It's amazing that these studies seem to suggest that they have been victimized at some point, and they don't know how to process what has occurred to them. The associations are expressed as odd ratios. For example, women who experienced non-genital sexual abuse in childhood were 2.83 times more likely to suffer drug dependence as adults than were women who were not abused. And so we know, based on the numbers, that individuals who have been abused are more likely to become dependent on some form of habit-forming drug. Studies have found that 51% to 79% of sexually abused children exhibit psychological symptoms. The risk of harm is greater if the abuser is a relative. And so children are more affected by being violated by a family member than by a stranger. Why? Because I believe that in a home, it is expected that you're safe. Parents put a lot of energy trying to protect them children from outsiders, from neighborhood children, more concerned about who our children spend time with. And now, today, with the easy access to smartphones, to the internet, to Netflix, and I'm going to tell you something. People with Netflix and Hulu and many of these other movie online programs aren't going to watch PG movies. Most of these, when you look at, and we've had them, we've got them, we see them, that the majority of the movies that are being put out there are rated R's. There's X-rated. And then PG-13s might as well. PG-13s today were the R-rated movies yesterday. And you would be hard-pressed to watch any movie that they don't put some form of lesbian or gay scene just for no reason whatsoever. Here you are, you're watching the movie, and all of a sudden, they just throw it in there. Took my son to a movie last year, and all of a sudden, now this is like a cartoon movie, and one of the characters is cross-dressing. It's like, what in the world is this for? It wasn't even necessary. But the point is, because these things are made in Hollywood, many of them, in Disney, and Pixar, the whole goal is that they're not ordained by Jehovah. And if they're not ordained by Jehovah, then they're ordained by some other entity. And the goal is not to push you closer to Jehovah. The goal is to put this wall of division to keep you from going in that direction. Remember, we have an enemy. There are two entities in the earth that desire to have you. That's the spirit of Jehovah and the devil. There's nothing else. As we were looking at Galatians, in Galatians chapter 6, we looked at it last week, that when we sow to our carnal, our human nature, we will reap corruption. Sowing to our human nature is when we are moved by entertainment. And let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, entertainment has taken over churches. It's all about entertainment for many. Are you hearing me? And this is why it grieves me. People say, you know, I watch your show. I said, we don't have a show. That's a prevalent word among religions now, religious people. They got a show. You watch the television show. And I'm watching some of these networks. It's, you know, this show and this person's show. And it's become so common that people refer to what is going on right now as a show. And I have to correct them, we don't produce shows. When we were doing recordings outside of our own environment, everybody's referring to, you know, Spirit-Filled Living Show, Arthur Bailey Ministry Show. Listen, folks, we don't do shows here. We ain't putting on no show. We ain't putting on no performance. This is not about trying to entertain one's flesh. To be visually appealing, yeah, we understand that people see by sight, they walk by sight, and we want to be as visually appealing as we can so that people can at least be stimulated when they look. But the goal is not to stimulate the eye. The goal is not to tickle the ear. The goal is to get in and bring the word of truth that is going to transition one's life. And I'm going to tell you something. There's a big difference between this setup and the curtains. Those of you remember the curtains, just go back through the archives. Remember we had the big old white banner. And then we had the curtains. And all of this is to be visually appealing because we understand that people who confess to walk by faith really walk by sight. The social stigma of child sexual abuse may compound the psychological harm to children and adverse outcomes are less likely for abused children who have supportive family environments. Now, the goal is to protect our children from being abused. That's the ultimate goal. But let's be realistic. Some of us have focused on outside, and much of what has occurred among our children have occurred right under our noses. So what happens when you have a child who has been abused? Now you got to minister to them. And they need to understand a few things. They need to understand that, one, it's not their fault. And as parents, we have to help them walk through that process. But let me tell you something, the best way to help them is to prepare them before they have contact and interaction with the outside world. That was the goal of Jehovah telling his people, listen, I'm going to give you some commandments, and I need you to be diligent in teaching them to your children. Now, within the commandments, the Almighty had already expressed that man-on-man relationships are inappropriate. So anytime you, son, are touched by another boy, or they are looking at you or saying certain things to you, that's inappropriate behavior. And if that ever happens, the first thing you want to do is you want to come and tell me. Any form of touch among children, you want to know that your child understands that that's not appropriate. No one has a right to look or touch you in your private area, and they need to know what their private area is. And that's basically all of you. All of you is private. So anytime someone wants to touch you, you need to let me know. You see, anytime someone wants to go under your clothes, you need to scream, and you need to make sure you let me know. Because let me tell you something, folks. We can't watch our children 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But we can teach them to be diligent in watching themselves. Now, when I was young, they used to talk about the birds and the bees. But that was a conversation that generally happened when little boys start getting erections and little girls start having their periods. Let me tell you something, that's way too late. That's way too late. You want to start, no, you want to talk to them in the womb. You want to talk to them as soon as they hear that first, they cry that first cry. This is what Jehovah is talking about. He says, listen, you need to be diligent. This is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week job as a parent. You can't slack off. Because once a child has been affected, now you got to go into a whole different mode. Whereas if you move into the preventive mode, then you can prevent a whole lot. An ounce of prevention is worth more, as they say, than a pound of cure. And so children who have been affected, they should be able to come and talk to you. It's unfortunate that most parents have already been affected, and as a result, don't make good parenting. There are some statistics. I got pages and pages of them. And I'm reading this and I'm looking at them and it's like, man, wow. Few of them I gave us. The enemy has been waging war against the saints for millenniums, ladies and gentlemen. The Bible tells us in Revelation chapter 12 that the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. Now, this was written 2,000 years ago. This dragon, that old serpent, the devil, has been waging war for thousands of years. And his target is not so much the world as it is the saints. Because who is he waging war with? The remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Yeshua the Messiah. The war is being waged against us. Now imagine this. Here you are as a parent, and you want your child to be a believer and to walk in the way of the Almighty. But you fall under the guise that certain conversations are inappropriate for small children. Do you know what? There is no conversation that is inappropriate for any child of yours that you let watch TV. If you let them watch TV, they're getting inappropriate information. They're seeing it. Inappropriate information. And you can turn on Monkey Joe or whatever, what is the little monkey, Curious George. You can turn on any one of them, Bugs Bunny, Elmer Fudd. Way back when I was a child, they were perverted. The Road Runner. They were perverted then. So if your child is able to watch TV, if you're going to put a video in front, and see, many of you, you don't even realize sometimes, especially moms. Let me give you a key, a nugget. Even when you're nursing your child, if you're breastfeeding your child and you're watching your soap opera, you're watching some television program, you got to understand words are spirit. And there are things that go on. It is a proven fact that children in the womb respond to certain things that are going on outside the womb. It is a proven fact that parents have been able to communicate to their child while they are still in the womb. Tests have been done, and there are institutions and businesses that are being made that are helping parents prepare. They're preparing their children to be smart, to be intellectual, to be geniuses while they're still carrying them. Our children, though they aren't aware of they may not be physically cognizant of how to process what's going on outside of the womb, but they know and they are aware that there are things going on outside the womb. Some people say that we were overprotective as parents. We didn't let our children do sleepovers. We didn't let them go places. We were very, very careful. They say we were overprotective. Grandma wasn't babysitting. Grandpa. My wife and I, we sacrificed a lot. We didn't go places. We didn't do things because she didn't trust. She didn't trust our children to be exposed to other people other than her. And she had a reason for that. You see. There are ways that people process information. And people process it quite differently. When we think about certain things, as a matter of fact, let me just read, because there were just way too many of these stats. more than 90% of abusers are people children know, love, and trust. 30 to 40% of victims are abused by a family member. Nearly 70% of all reported sexual assaults, including assaults on adults, occur to children ages 17 and under. And when I look at some of this, like this one, those who molest children, as I said, look and act just like everyone else. And when we think about that, you know, pedophiles, there's some people you look at and you say, that looks like a pedophile. Now, maybe y'all don't do that. But there's some people, they just look like a pedophile. They look like, you know, I wouldn't trust that person around my child. And they may not be anything like that, but they just have a look. Most pedophiles don't look like pedophiles. They don't. When as I was pulling together this information, I saw something within the statistics that caused me to begin to connect some dots in my own life. Because I think that when we all look back and we look at our behaviors and personalities, we have to ask ourselves, what is it that motivates us to do the things that we do? Check out this one stat. It says, adults with a history of child sexual abuse are 30% more likely than their non-abused peers to have a serious medical condition such as diabetes, cancer, heart problems, stroke, or hypertension. Sexually abused children who keep it a secret or who tell and are not believed are at greater risk than the general population for psychological, emotional, social, and physical problems, often lasting into adulthood. Over 75% of serial rapists report they were sexually abused as a child. Nearly 50% of women in prison state they were abused as children. When we look at these things and we look at people's behavior, it's hard for us to pinpoint why a person is behaving the way they behave. But medical journals and medical science and those who study psychology and those who are in the business of helping people get beyond psychological trauma, they ask particular questions because they know that many of the adults that are committing the crimes and the types of crimes that many are committing is associated to some disorder, some effect, some adverse effect that occurred in that child's life as a young person. Even what is prevalent among deliverance ministries is that the premise is that every person who needs deliverance have daddy issues. That every person who is in need of deliverance is suffering from the sins of the fathers. And so the goal is to try to get an adult to go back to their little girl and their little boy period to see what has happened to them when they were a little boy or a little girl, because the suspicion is that this child has been molested. This child has been abused. This child had been raped. Last month, when I was in California, I was invited to speak at a Hispanic congregation who had heard me speak earlier, actually the day before, at the university when I went out to get the accreditation for our discipleship training course. And when they invited me, I immediately accepted the invitation, because we were looking for invitations knowing that Father was going to open door, and we didn't know where. And I didn't know if he opened the door, what. I've got hundreds of PowerPoint presentations, but when I received the invitation, as I do anytime I receive an invitation outside of here, and David can attest, he's traveled with me, Simona can attest, those who have come to conferences, that in recent memory over the last year or two, that even when I go into a conference, they want me to present my teachings before I get there. And I always have a problem with that, because it feels as if I've got to give them something, which now causes them to put this into their bulletin. And now I have to teach a prescribed teaching, and it turns off, or it has the potential of turning off the voice of the Almighty and forcing me down a track. But my goal is always to minister to the people who are in attendance, and oftentimes I have no idea who those people are until I'm in attendance with them. And what I will do is, and I've been known, it creates a dilemma when I've told them that I'm going to teach on a particular subject, and now I have to figure out by the Spirit how to incorporate what Father is showing me within the subject matter. Because I have to be true to my word and hold true, and not come in and preach something that is contrary to what I said I was going to preach, but at the same time not shut off the voice of the Almighty so that he can speak to the individuals that are there. And whether you know it or not, most of what I do is prophetic. If I hear something and I think it's coming from the Almighty, I'll say it. People call it rabbit trails, call it what you want, but the fact of the matter is that when Father speaks to me, to speak to his people, because see, you all are his people, you're not my people. And that's the approach I take. So if I say something that's going to drive you away, if you're my people, I'm not going to say anything that's going to drive you away. So I'm not going to give you what he gives me. I got to tickle your ears so you'll feel comfortable. And this is why ministries get into the ear tickling business, because they're trying to build congregations and build denominations and build their churches. But the focus and the goal is to build people, and sometimes when you're building people, you say things to people that people don't want to hear. Let me tell you something. If I teach and you don't get upset or ticked off or start thinking or go down some rabbit trail or get, want to throw something at me, then, maybe I haven't heard. But the Bible tells us that no correction is pleasant when it comes, and when we come together, the Father is always speaking to us, because the goal is to correct you, because in order to perfect you, you got to be corrected if you're not already perfected. And if the correction comes to perfect you, you have a responsibility, a choice: reject the instructions or embrace the instructions. But the tendency is to get upset for some people. And those who have become accustomed to it know that I'm not here to try to upset you. I'm here to give you what he's given me. So I'm out in California. I have no idea what I'm ministering. Pastors got me in the office because they like bringing you in the office. I want to get out there in the congregation. I want to get out there, and I want to I want to feel, I want to sense, I want to discern. And you'll notice that, the way I do it sometimes, and this is just a little instructions, those of you who are online, you won't be able to see this, but I'll find myself sitting and I just get into my own space. Because what I'm doing right now is I'm listening, I'm hearing, I'm trying to get his direction and where he wants me to go. That's what I'm trying to do. So I'm sitting there and I'm hearing, and I'm not understanding what I'm hearing. And so now it's time to get up and start speaking. And I still haven't really fully got what he's saying to me, but as I'm speaking, and I've heard people say, I can tell when you've tapped in. There are folks who write me and they say, I know when you tap in, there's something happens. Now I don't see it, but I feel it, but I'm not aware of it, although I know it's happening. I'm not intricately aware of the fact that, okay, something just happened. But people who are watching and listening, they know. While I'm speaking, Father begins to speak to me, and he says that this congregation is full of individuals who have been abused and individuals who have abused. They're victims, and then there's victimizers. And it's in the area of sexual arena. Now, what I didn't know is that the congregation had been praying and fasting for the last month or two, and they knew that a breakthrough was coming, but something was keeping the breakthrough from happening. And that Father is now sending me to speak to what's going on in the congregation that they are not aware of. And so I began to talk about sexual abuse. And I'm thinking, man, this is a strange subject. But I come to find out that over half of this congregation was traumatized because of abuses, sexual molestations, rape, and it wasn't just men. It wasn't just women who were victims, there were men. And so I began to speak on issues because, see, this thing plays itself out in so many different ways. If you're in a home and these kinds of things have happened, the home doesn't feel safe. And you'll find children lock themselves up in their room. They become antisocial. They always got headphones in their ear. And that's not to say that everybody who has headphones in their ear have been affected by that, but they're disconnected, you see. Many of our children, because of social media and cell phones and things of that nature, are lured into the internet, and 1 in 5 children have been sexually solicited on the internet. So every time your child sits in front of the internet, there is an opportunity that they're going to be sexually solicited, especially if you are a Windows PC person. Let me just throw that out there. The government now is talking about this encryption and Macs and all of these things, but you don't see nearly as many pop-ups on an Apple device as you see on a Windows PC device. Hackers are easily able to hack into PC and send unwanted messages to unsuspecting children. I remember when we first brought internet in our home several years ago, long before it became popular. Our children had access, and I'm an adult. I'm on my computer, and all of a sudden pornography just jumps up on the screen. I didn't look for that. It just jumped up. Emails are coming and look like they're coming from someone you know. And what happens is that you click on the link because you think it was sent, and next thing you know, you're going down a path where they've taken your computer hostage and taken all of your information hostage and start sending out unwanted information to all of your contacts. Facebook. PC users on Facebook. Messages coming, click. Next thing you know, hijack, and your Facebook page is sending information to all of your Facebook friends. And now you got to close your account, open up a new account, send all your friends, hey, if you're getting messages, I didn't send them. The internet has made molestation, pornography, sexual abuse easier than at any other time in our lives. And when we begin to look at some of the behavior, sexual promiscuity, individuals, multiple sexual partners. Well, one of the statistics that I read was bedwetting. And you see, what I'm talking to you about is something that I personally have had to deal with. You see, I was molested as a child by a family member. And I began wetting the bed. They used to call me Petey Boy because I not only wet the bed, but I smelled like pee. And I didn't understand. You know, I wet the bed until I was almost 18 years old. And I couldn't understand this. My dad used to beat me because he thought that if he beat me enough, I would stop wetting the bed. It didn't work. I was in boot camp, 17 years old. I graduated from high school in May. In June, I was in boot camp in San Diego, California. I remember two specific incidents while I'm in boot camp, in barracks, overnight, wetting the bed as a 17-year-old in boot camp. Having to take my mattress out of my bunk, out of my barrack, and hang it on the line that is in between all of the barracks, and now every boot camper on the base, on my side of the base rather, was aware that somebody wet the bed. Now here's what they attributed it to. The military attributed it to stress disorder. Child, he's come from home, he's in boot camp, he's got these sergeants, not sergeants, but company commanders yelling commands. And so they attributed it to the fact that this was something that occurs from time to time with new recruits. Last night, as I was reading the research, for the first time in my life, I made the connection between bedwetting and child abuse. Now here I'm 57 years old. And couldn't understand, and everything I tried and everything I wanted to do, trying to stop this behavior because it was embarrassing. And I couldn't. Didn't know. I didn't even know what it was associated with. But when I made the connection yesterday, last night, I'm going down back into my past, because one thing that I know, even though I made the connection to bedwetting to child abuse, I became aware of the child abuse, the sexual abuse many years ago, and I confronted it and I dealt with it. And so I haven't had the issue with knowing. It wasn't some trauma that all of a sudden I had remembrance of what happened, because I dealt with this many years ago, but I never connected the bedwetting to it. And then I start connecting other behavior patterns in my life and things that I did, and the way I thought and how I saw life and how I saw everything. I began to make those connections on how This traumatic experience as a child affected me and manifested itself over the course of my 50 years. Let's see. Helping people make those connections so that cycles can be broken, behavior patterns can be broken. Not only broken, but destroyed. And I'm going to tell you something. You know, this is where people said, okay, if we come into deliverance. But let me tell you something. The people that the enemy is after the most are those who keep the commandments and have the testimony of Yeshua. So as I'm ministering to this congregation, man, over half the congregation responds to the abused, and about a third of the congregation responded to the abuser. Now, I'm going to tell you something, and I remember it took me about half an hour. Because, see, when I know I've heard from the Almighty, you can't tell me nothing differently, because I know. It took me about a half an hour to convince the abused that it is okay to acknowledge that you've been abused, because healing is here. And the Father began to show me, and I saw people, they're sitting there, they're locked up, afraid, embarrassed, didn't want others to know. Because what we've become, ladies and gentlemen, is that we've become master showmans. We put on facades. We got masks. We don't want people to see underneath the mask. We want people to see us the way we want to be seen, not even realizing that we are an adult hurt child locked up inside, unable to truly be expressive and free. And therefore, in order for us to experience freedom, we feel that we got to put everybody around us in bondage. We got to control everything and everybody around us before we can feel comfortable in coming out of our shell. And the moment we see something that threatens it, we right back. And so here I am trying to convince these individuals, convincing the individuals that had been abused, as even though it took a lot of time, it was more difficult to get the abuser to identify themselves as an abuser. Many people who abuse others have been abused themselves. And it's unfortunate that too many abused children become adults who were abused as a child and who've never processed or worked through that abuse, and it's only manifested itself in different ways, and then you get married. And got all these issues locked up. And little things are said and little things are done. And all of a sudden that stuff starts coming to the surface because it's never been dealt with. And now you don't know how to relate and don't know how to get along with other people. Because most people go through life with this abuse, and it manifests itself because now you find 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 girlfriends and fiancés and husbands. You've gone through this person in that relationship, this person in that relationship, this person in that relationship, this person in that relationship. You've been divorced once, been divorced twice, been divorced 3 times. Engaged. It didn't go through. Engaged again. It didn't go through. Engaged again. Didn't go through. Finally married. Finally got somebody. But now having to deal with all of these thoughts And then comes Facebook. And some of these folks' faces that you thought were gone forever begin to pop up in your feed. Now all this stuff comes flooding back. Dealing with the relationship and trying to keep something on the down low. Folks, it's time to come clean. That's the bottom line. When I said that as a child, I've been abused sexually, and it manifested itself, and I couldn't put the pieces together. Drugs, alcohol, promiscuity, just wanting to get away, wanting to run, wanting to hide, becoming adventurous and curious. These were things, these were ways this manifested in my life. How is it manifested in yours? Because see, as I've been praying for the Father to help me become whole, that means that I got to deal with issues that I would rather not have to deal with. I got to face down giants that I would rather leave sleeping. But guess what? They're going to wake up someday. Anyway, might as well be today. So here's what we're going to do. You know who you are and what you've been through and what you've experienced. There are two groups. There are those who have been abused, and then there are those who have abused. Now, the message, as I said in the beginning, is twofold. I'm hoping and praying that what I've said, as you as a parent would take your responsibility of the precious gift package that you've been given called a child. You see, a child is a blessing and a gift. And the Father gives us these blessings and these gifts so that we could train them up. We can create an environment where they're protected. We can nurture them and raise them up so that they become sharp arrows in your quiver to be used by the Almighty at the appointed time. So as a parent, my number one goal as a parent is to create a safe environment for my child so that I could teach them the fear and the admonition of Jehovah. And this is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job. There is no rest. I'm to talk to them when I get up. I'm to talk to them when I lie down. I'm to talk to them when I'm in the way with them. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. How come you always want to talk about the Bible? Because it's life. And if I don't talk to you about the Bible, which is life, that means that I got to talk to you about something else, and therefore I'm ministering to your carnal, fleshly nature, and therefore it's going to reap corruption. Well, you ought to take your child to the ball game. How's the ball game going to teach them about Jehovah? How is watching somebody get hit carrying a ball down the field going to help them in their spiritual journey? If anything, it's going to make them want to be on that field. And guess what? If I put them on the field, if I put them in the game, if I give them the lessons so that they can become some athlete, that means that they're going to have to now forego the Sabbath. They're going to have to forego the feast. They're going to have to do all the stuff that is required for them to be in the game, which means the game in itself for the pursuit of fame and for the pursuit of being a professional athlete is going to pull them away from Jehovah. So why would I want to put my child in an environment that is going to pull them away from the very thing that the Almighty has instructed me to instill in them? And I know I've had some children, they're upset. They've been upset because I didn't let them play. And now research has come out that a lot of these children who have been involved in football are dealing with head trauma My brother, it blessed me so much because one of the persons that was on me so much about getting my children involved in sport, because he's a coach in the football, he's a coach in baseball, his son's a wrestler. Get your children involved in sports, get them involved in sports. He called me last month and he said, I'm so happy you didn't listen to me. There's a movie out now, Will Smith is running, Concussion. This is something that they've hid for years, that these professional athletes, especially in football, and if it's not football, it's basketball, which is why these guys have a certain amount of time before the stress on their body causes them to fall apart. After 50, 60 years old, they're almost good for nothing. They're on all kinds of medicines. Shots, injections, pain medications, back pain. One of the leading sports persons, Shaq, out there advertising for medication for pain. Head trauma, psychological disorders, suicides. Because we're throwing our children out there in that sports arena to be, what do they call those people when they used to put them out in the ring with the lions? Gladiators. I'm not raising gladiators. I'm raising saints. What are you raising? My job is to train them up in the way they should go. My job is to teach them the fear of Jehovah. My job is to teach them about the commandments, the judgments, and the statutes of Jehovah, so they will be prosperous. That's our role. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. My, have we failed. But I'm glad to tell you that it's not too late. So for those of us who have young children who have not been impacted or affected, get on your job. Get on your job. For those of you who have allowed the enemy to slip in, it's time to reverse some issues by dealing with some issues and taking on the responsibility of helping your child work through these issues and make them aware. And the research I'd be glad to make available. You can look at the warning signs, anything that is going on. Talking to one of the precious sisters, an educator, children coming in their classrooms, middle schoolers, elementary schoolers, high schoolers, coming in classrooms, cussing each other out, cussing out teachers, no respect. They don't respect themselves. They don't respect their parents. They're certainly not going to respect their teachers. And if your child, and listen, I'm not an advocate for violence, but if my child cuss at me, they might lose a tooth. Oh, brother, no, if they got the audacity to talk to me like they got no sense, then I might help them not have any. You want to talk to me like you crazy? I'm going to treat you like you crazy. Now, that's not how I want to treat you, so you better talk like you got some sense. You ain't the parent. And there's too many children who are parenting their parents, holding the parents hostage, telling the parents what they're going to do and what they're not going to do, and talking back to their parents. That's an indication you ain't done your job. Well, now, brother, wait a minute. Now, praise the Lord. Now, you praise him. And I'm telling you, man, it bothers me to, you know, I had to probably stop wearing a belt because it's hard for me to go out in the supermarket and the grocery store and watch some of these children. You know what I'm saying? I've been talking to the parents. You need a belt? You need some help? Mind your own business. Oh. Okay. Yeah, you do need some help. So for the parent whose child has not been affected, get on your job. For the parent whose child has been affected, get on your job. For the parent who was affected and who've not been able to release and let go so that the healing and the wholeness of Messiah can manifest itself fully in your life, we're going to minister to you. If you've ever been abused and you say, well, I've already dealt with that, and that's good. I hope you have. I'm here to bring reinforcement. And whether you are a child, whether you are a teenager, you know, teenagers don't like to be called children. Young adult, middle-aged adult, old adult. I was really surprised, as I said, when I was in California and I saw this old man, and he wept like a baby. All these years he had been carrying in his spirit the fact that he had abused, and probably watching the effect of his actions manifest itself in the life of the one he abused. And after much prodding, he finally stood up and came, and I saw him. He was sitting there weeping, and I invited him and encouraged him. And I'm going to tell you, he wept like a baby, wept. People falling on the floor, nobody touching them, and they weren't falling and hurting themselves. They were just so overcome with the emotion. And it was more so, I think, that the Father saw them just like he see you. You see, when Yeshua said that the child has angels, and this angel is ever before the presence of Jehovah. You see, from the moment you were abused to this moment, it has always been in the face of Jehovah. He has seen you. He has seen you through every complicated and difficult situation you've been in. Those that you've caused on yourself, those that you've perpetrated. He has seen you. Why? Because from the moment you were abused, it has always been before his face. Whether it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago, last year, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, he has seen it, and he has seen the effects of it. And he has seen how it's manifested itself, how it's played out. And he has watched how you, unaware, totally unaware that this behavior is a result of that. That action was a result of that, because it's manifested itself in various ways over the course of your life, and the Father has watched. And as these individuals was in that congregation, and these women, they were weeping, and these men were weeping, and they were just, I believe part of it was being overwhelmed, that Father saw them. He has watched and he saw them. And to bring, and you got to understand, you know, here it is, and I pay a mind to it because I'm always aware of it, but it's not a big issue, because I go wherever Father sends me. I was the second, there was 2 black people in the whole congregation. And I say that because I'm always finding myself as a minority in the body, ministering to people. And I'm watching, and these people, and here it is, I'm this black man in this entirely congregation of Hispanic individuals from various places of South American origin, Guatemala, Mexico, and a couple of other places that don't even from Cuba, interestingly enough. And I'm ministering to these people and they're receiving, and it's like the Spirit of Jehovah always ready to manifest and to bring his healing power. If you've ever been sexually assaulted, whether you've been molested as a child or raped as a young adult or as a child, the Father is mindful. And what he wants to do is he wants to heal you so that these things don't play themselves out in an unhealthy way that is to your disadvantage. Let me give you this last scripture. Yeshua came and he said these words. He says, the Spirit of Jehovah is upon me because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted. And this broken heart, there's a story in Samuel, I believe, 2 Samuel, I think. It's the story of Tamar, the sister of Absalom, the half-sister of Amnon, who were sons of David. Amnon desired his stepsister. And so he perpetrated a plan by the advice of a heathen he shouldn't have been associated with in the first place, because let me tell you something. Bad advice is just bad advice, regardless to who it comes from. But this individual encouraged Amnon to play this game, and it wasn't a game, but it was a serious act to lure his stepsister into his chambers. And he pulled his dad in on it. So he played sick. That's what he did. He played sick. And he said to his dad, David, to send Tamar and have her make bread in his presence. Now, some was wrong with that already. I want to watch her make bread. And not only do I want to watch her make bread, but then I want her to serve the bread she made for me with her own hands in my bedchamber. And David sent her to Amnon's bedchamber. And Amnon made all of his servants leave once the bread was done, the meal was prepared. And then he grabbed his stepsister, his half-sister, if you would, not his half-sister, and he told her to lie with him. And she said to him, this is not done in all of Israel. And he forced herself on her. And she was broken. Now, this is a brother on sister. She was so broken that her brother saw her and he knew immediately. He says, have Amnon done this to you? And then he said, be quiet. You see, this is the kind of stuff that happens in many families, that when abuse and incest and molestation has occurred, the tendency is to keep it quiet. It's embarrassing. We don't want other people to know. And so the child never got help But from that point on, she was forever altered, and she remained in Absalom's house as a broken woman. And 2 years later, Absalom figured out a way to seek revenge on his brother Amnon, and he killed his brother. Certain types of behavior that occurs in our homes, in our lives, causes us, and it may take a month, it may take a year, it may take 2 years, it may take 3 years, it may take 5 years, it may take 10 years. However long it takes, the idea that justice should be served and vengeance takes root in the heart, and then the malice that tries to figure out how to make somebody pay for the shame and the embarrassment and the hurt and the affliction that they've caused a family member. David knew and didn't do anything. Dad knew and didn't do anything. If you've ever been sexually molested, raped, sexually abused, I want to minister to you today. We're going to pray for you. We're going to ask Father to heal you, to deliver you, to set you free, so that the adverse behavior and effects of that thing happening to you don't play itself off. Because I also believe that it hinders people from walking in the fullness of the ministry that the Almighty has given them. It stops them from moving forward. They feel like there's this blockage, this inability to hear. And sometimes there's such a desire to serve in the kingdom, but not know how, not feeling worthy, not feeling qualified. If that's you, and even if you do feel qualified and you do feel worthy, but you know these things have happened to you, and even as we've talked today, you've probably had flashbacks and seen things that have been a part of the behavior that was a result. We're going to minister to you. Those of you joining us at home, we want to minister to you too. We just want you to acknowledge it. And what we've tried to do is create a safe environment for people where healing and deliverance can take place. I've spoken to David already, and we're going to forego the questions and simply move into a time of ministry. And then at one point, we're going to invite you to stand for people that you know have been sexually molested and abused. We want to have you stand in proxy for them. But first, we want to minister to you. One of the stats showed that parents who have been molested as a child, who grow up as an adult and have children, there are a couple of things. One is they either overprotected and don't let the children out of their sight, or they have free-range children. Children just go and do whatever they want to do. Are you with me? And there are a lot of parents that just let their children go. They go and play, just don't bother me. They're too busy watching TV or trying to sleep or something like that. And so the children is growing themselves up. Now, I know this is not the easiest thing to do to admit, but I've already admitted it. I've admitted it. And it's amazing that even though you have been damaged, bruised, hurt, molested, defiled even, that Father can still find a way to use you. And I want to say to you, don't think about what somebody else thinks about you, because the only thing that really matters is what he thinks. That's really all that matters. And you can allow your mind to say to you, I'm not going to enter into this time. I want Father to just visit me privately, maybe when I get home, because I don't want anybody else to know. Listen, the devil knows. And that's who's talking to you right now. Because he don't want you to deal with it. He don't want you to acknowledge it. He don't want you to face it. He wants you to do it privately, because he knows that if you can avoid this moment, chances are you'll never get to that private moment. And therefore, another day, another week, another month, another year. If you're courageous enough, bold enough, strong enough, desirous enough to experience his anointing for complete healing and deliverance, to walk in complete freedom and to help others become free, I want to invite you to enter into this time. If you've been molested, if you've been abused, been raped, and even though you've confronted it, even though you feel you've dealt with it, I believe Father has brought this particular message to us here today so that we can literally be done with this once and for all. I just need you to stand with me. Who's going to be bold enough? And I know it's tough for boys, for men. That's one of the things Father shared with me. He says, you expose yourself. Let people know that this has happened to you. Don't be afraid. Because what stops people from moving into this is embarrassment. And that's the exact thing that the enemy wants, is for you to be too embarrassed to acknowledge it, too embarrassed to confess it, too embarrassed to publicly expose it. And so I'm going to give you another opportunity. If you've ever been molested, if you've ever been raped, if you've ever been sexually abused, whether you be a child, whether you be a teenager, a young adult, an old adult, if that's you, I want you to stand to your feet. Now, if you've ever abused, and I say, one of the things that sometimes people have a hard time accepting is that they think consensual sexual activity is not abuse. Consensual sexual activity is self-abuse. The Bible tells us that when you fornicate, you sin against your own body. And whether you know it or not, once you have crossed the line and you've had sex before marriage, it has forever altered your psyche and how you see things and people. And so, yes, fornication would even fall into that category. If you have abused others, whether you've raped, molested, drugged, taken advantage of someone who was not consciously aware. There's a big case going on right now of individuals being drugged and taken advantage of. I want to minister to you, and those of you who are joining us at home, please take advantage of this opportunity. Don't miss out on it. If you know someone who has been molested, maybe you've been trying to minister to them, Maybe you are ministering to them now. Maybe you see the effects of what has happened to them and you want to stand in proxy with them. Now, don't stand under the guise that you're standing for someone else when you're actually standing for yourself. If that's you, you can stand with us. Father, we're asking your presence to fill this room. We thank you for your presence being here. We're asking you to fill this room and each person. Father, we know that it is your desire to make us whole. That's the purpose of Messiah. To bring healing and deliverance to us, to set us free, to preach deliverance to the captives, the recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised. And there's so much abused, or so many abused and bruised saints. And how these things have manifested in their lives over the course of their lifetime. I pray now for the healing power, even as we acknowledge these things that have taken place in our lives. I thank you for the exposure of information and knowledge. And even those, Father, who've not yet come to the realization that these things have occurred to them, that you make them well aware so that they too can be whole, healed, delivered. As we've looked at the stats and how these things manifest themselves in sicknesses and in abuses of chemicals and drugs and other things, Father, we pray right now that your power, your presence, your healing power will manifest and set people free in this place today. We decree in the name of Yeshua that all abuse and its symptoms, every effect of it cease at this particular moment. Every broken heart, broken spirit, bruised spirit be healed at this moment. Father, I pray that you will do a work in the mind of your people, in the heart and the emotion realm of your people, Father, so that this day forward they could walk in the fullness of their health and their wholeness. We want prosperity to manifest in their spirit, in their soul, in their body, in reality. We want the captives to be set free in this place today. And not only those who are here, Father, but those who are joining us via the internet. Father, I pray for your anointing that destroy every yoke, every yoke, every yoke. The prisons that they've put themselves in, the limitations that they've put on themselves, the fears that they have embraced, all of the negative impact of the things that have occurred in their lives, Father, at this moment, I'm praying for the destruction, that you destroy these things in their lives. Father, I pray for every child who have been molested, Father, that the proper outcomes as it relates to the help, the ministry of your Spirit, to know that they've been a victim, but they don't have to remain one. That you would heal them and deliver them and set them free. And that they will be protectors of those who are unable to protect themselves. For the parent who have had to deal with this. I pray that you give them the wisdom, give them the knowledge and understanding by your Spirit on how to minister to their child, to their children. That they will put the boundaries of protection and take the responsibility of a parent to train and teach and be diligent in instructing their children according to your commands, your judgments, and statutes. Father, that as parents we take on this responsibility 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as you have instructed, so that we will be diligent in not only teaching our children, but protecting them so they in turn can teach their children and their children their children. We desire to see the prosperity of Jehovah. We desire to see your power manifest in our lives. We desire to embrace and to walk in every promise manifested. And we certainly need the peace that surpasses all understanding to permeate our beings. All the fears and the phobias, all the quirks, even the faulty and perverted worldview, self-identity, exploration, exploitation, the curiosity, the mistaken identity, the identity issues and crises. Father, we're praying for healing all the way around. And that these places that was once not safe, Father, that you'll help parents and guardians to create safe havens so that their children, those who are in their care, can be nurtured and protected and ministered to, that they feel safe in their environments. We pray for those parents who were once abused themselves, Father, for the healing power to minister, to permeate, to manifest in their lives. Just lift your hands up. Father, I'm asking you for your power now. I'm asking you for your presence now. I'm asking you for your anointing now. To just feel every soul, every heart, every vessel, every body. And give your people words of knowledge and wisdom, strength, that they can walk out, walk in the divine plan that you have foreordained for them. Father, I bless them. I bless them with your blessing. May Jehovah bless you. May he keep you. May he cause his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift up his countenance upon you. May he give you peace. Amen. Shalom, saints. Tithing and giving first fruit offerings are critical parts of the believer's faith and has its foundation back in Genesis 4:4, when Abel brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And Jehovah had respect unto Abel and to his offering. Abel was commended by Jehovah in Hebrews 11:4, where it states that by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh. Solomon said in Proverbs 3:9 and 10, honor Jehovah with thy substance and with the first fruits of all thine increase. So shall your barns be filled with plenty, and your presses shall burst out with new wine. The prophet Malachi wrote in chapter 3, verse 11 and 12, to bring ye all the tithe into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, says Jehovah of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there should not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, and he shall not destroy the fruits of your ground, neither shall your vine cast her fruit before the time in the field, says Jehovah of hosts. And all nations shall call you blessed, for you shall be a delightsome land, saith Jehovah of hosts. When we tithe and give offerings consistently in obedience to Jehovah's commandments, we can count on him to keep his promises to us and consistently meet all of our needs. It is our Father's desire to bless you. However, it begins with you and your act of obedience to tithe and give offerings. Do it today. Shalom.
For more information, visit www.arthurbaileyministries.com or call 888-899-1479. House of Israel International Services is made possible through financial contributions from brothers and sisters like you. Thank you.